Yet I'm dying. I don't have many regrets in life, but the one thing I can't let go of is my wife. I haven't told her the news yet. I'm afraid she won't be able to handle it, and I have no idea what she'll do after I'm gone. I'm a software engineer. 3 years ago, I was heading home after pulling an all-nighter at the office sometime around midnight. Cutting through a narrow alley, I saw a couple of drunks harassing a young woman. She looked like she was in shock, frozen. She didn't scream or fight, just stared blankly as I yelled at the guys and chased them off. After they were gone, I started to walk away, but something felt wrong. I looked back, and the woman was still standing there, not moving a muscle. It was the middle of the night, and I couldn't just leave her there alone. What if someone else came along? So I walked back to her. "Hey, you okay?" I said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you. What are you doing out here in a dark alley so late? You should get home. Do you need money for an Uber?" "I've got some cash." I held out a 20, but she just shook her head, not taking it. Confused, I put the money back in my pocket. I figured she was still just scared, maybe of me. I turned and started to leave again. But then, she started following me. I walked, she walked. I stopped, she stopped. "Why are you following me?" "Go home," I said a little more firmly this time. I pulled out my phone. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." "I have nowhere to go," she said, her voice quiet but clear. It was the first time she'd spoken. At that hour, almost nothing was open. I ended up taking her to a 24-hour McDonald's and ordered her some food, but she didn't touch it. "What about your parents? Your family?" She just shook her head, her wide eyes fixed on me. "What's your name?" "Eve," she said, not hesitating this time. "So why me? Why are you following me?" "I don't know where else to go. I don't know what to do." I sighed. A beautiful woman wandering the streets alone at night was just asking for trouble. "Do you want to come home with me?" The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. "Okay. Aren't you afraid I could be a bad guy?" She tilted her head. "Even if you were, I'm not afraid. But I have a feeling you're a good person. You can't just go home with strange men," I lectured. "Even if I'm a good person." I scoffed internally at the idea she could protect herself. I found out later she wasn't bluffing. Once, when we were play wrestling, she had me pinned in seconds. I didn't stand a chance. "I took you back to my place." My parents had died in an accident a couple of years prior, leaving me their 2-bedroom condo. The spare room was empty, so it was perfect. I got her settled in with fresh towels and new sheets. As I was leaving the room, she asked, "Is there anything you want me to do?" I shook my head, then paused at the door, feeling a wave of responsibility. "Seriously, though," I said, "you can't just go home with a stranger like this. It's dangerous. And you shouldn't just do whatever someone tells you to." Eve tilted her head again. "I know you're a good person. And besides, nobody can force me to do anything." I still didn't take her seriously. I just figured she was some dramatic runaway teenager. "Get a good night's sleep," I said. "You should go home tomorrow. Your parents are probably worried sick." She didn't say anything. The next morning, I had to be at the office early to catch the morning stand-up. It didn't feel right to go into her room, so I just knocked on the door. "Hey, remember to call your parents," I said through the wood. "They'll be worried." There was no answer. I was in a hurry, so I left for work. After another long day and late night, I came home, assuming she'd be gone. But she wasn't. Not only was she still there, but she'd made dinner. "It's my first time cooking," she said nervously. "I don't know if it's any good." I took a bite. Honestly, it was terrible, but I ate every last bit. No one had cooked a meal and waited for me to come home since my mom passed away. And so Eve stayed. I asked her once if there was anything she wanted to do, if she wanted to look for a job. "I don't want to do anything," she'd said. My old life was exhausting. For now, I just want to rest. I was curious about her past, but I could tell it was a closed subject, so I never pushed it. Till we fell in love. We got married. There was no big wedding. We just went down to the courthouse. My parents were gone, and she never talked about hers. I assumed they were gone, too. We were each other's entire family. A fancy ceremony seemed pointless. I threw myself into work, taking every extra project I could. Eve stayed home, doing nothing in particular. And I was completely happy. I had someone waiting for me, a home-cooked meal on the table. In a city of a million lights, there was one that was shining just for me. I wanted to give her the best life I could. But now all of that was about to shatter. The doctor told me I had end-stage renal failure. Dialysis wasn't working anymore. I needed a kidney transplant, fast. The best-case scenario was a donation from a family member a compatible match that would let me skip the endless waiting list. But my parents were gone, and what distant cousin or uncle was going to give up a kidney for a relative they barely knew? As for Eve, I would never let her even consider it. So beyond the cost, there was the wait for a donor. And with my condition, I probably wouldn't last long enough. The transplant list in this country is a mile long. I decided not to even get on the list. I had about $150,000 in savings, plus the condo. I hoped it would be enough to get Eve by for a while. But how could I tell her? I had to, and soon. I needed to start planning for her future. The next day, I quit my job. I went home to tell Eve everything. Eve, I started, my voice heavy. There's something I need to tell you. She was curled up in the rocking chair by the window. Hearing the seriousness in my tone, she stopped rocking and looked at me, her eyes questioning. I handed her the medical report from the hospital. I am dying, Eve. My body's giving out, and there's no way I'll get a kidney in time. After I'm gone, the condo and all our savings are yours, but it's not enough to set you up for life. I wanted to say more, but Eve held up a hand, stopping me. She read the report carefully, her expression unreadable. Then she set it down and let out a soft sigh. Well, she said, almost to herself, that settles it. She stood up and wrapped her arms around me. It's going to be okay. I managed a bitter smile. How could it possibly be okay? Eve pulled away and grabbed her car keys from the hook by the door. Let's go, she said, her voice firm. Go where? Home, she said, starting the car, her face set with grim determination. Home? What home? I was confused. Other than our condo, what home did she have? A terrible thought crossed my mind. Was I the other man? Did she have someone on the side? My mind raced with a dozen paranoid scenarios. To my father's house. What? Your father's alive? I was floored. Why didn't you ever tell me? I thought he was gone. Panic seized me. My father-in-law was alive, and we'd gotten married without even telling him. I was going to die. All right, but not from kidney failure. He was going to kill me first. His daughter, missing for 3 years, finally comes home, and her first piece of news is that her husband is dying and she's about to be a widow. He'd think I was some kind of con artist. Eve, why didn't you ever mention him? Does he even know we're married? You did tell him, right? I asked, clinging to a shred of hope. No, she said, her single word crushing that hope completely. I felt numb. I was a monster. The scumbag who eloped with someone's daughter and then cut off all contact for 3 years. Eve, I'm a dead man. I moaned, my face pale. Your dad is going to murder me. Don't worry, she said, her usual quiet confidence returning. You'll be fine. I'm here. 3 of the cars sped along the highway, leaving the city lights of Seattle far behind, heading into darker, more remote territory. Was Eve's family poor? The further we drove, the more rural it got. But what good would going home do? To borrow money? We had money. If a kidney were available, the $150,000 would cover the surgery. The problem was I'd be dead before one ever was. As my mind spun, the car slowed and stopped in front of a massive gate set into a high stone wall. On the drive up, I'd seen the wall stretching for what seemed like miles. I figured it was some kind of park or a nature preserve. Turns out, it was a private estate. Were Eve's parents a butler and a maid here? He got out and pressed a button on an intercom. A crackly, elderly voice answered. Yes. It's me, Eve said. I heard a clatter from the speaker, a sharp intake of breath. Miss Eve? Is that really you, Miss Eve? It's me, she repeated. Quickly, the voice on the other end shouted, no longer speaking into the microphone. Go tell Mr. and Mrs. Linwood. The young miss is back. The excitement in his voice was palpable. He came back on the line. One moment, miss. I'll open the gate immediately. The heavy iron gates swung open silently. He got back in the car and drove through. As we moved down the long, winding driveway, lamps flickered on one by one, illuminating our path. Up ahead, a sprawling mansion lit up, every window blazing with light. The closer we got, the more noise I could hear, a flurry of activity. I was too busy being stunned to appreciate the manicured beauty of the estate. My quiet, unassuming wife was the heiress to a fortune. I didn't know how to feel. The responsibility I'd always felt to provide for her, to take care of our little family. It all felt like a joke now. Eve parked the car in the circular driveway in front of the main entrance. I got out, my legs feeling a little weak. On either side of the massive front doors, a line of maids in uniform stood perfectly still. Along the veranda above, a line of men, probably groundskeepers and other staff, stood just as rigidly. In the center of it all stood an older man, leaning on a heavy wooden cane. He radiated an aura of immense authority. This had to be Eve's father. Standing next to him, her hand on his arm, was an elegant, beautiful woman. She looked young enough to be Eve's older sister. And beside them, a man with a full head of white hair who had to be the butler. I had just finished my survey of the scene when he got out of the car. "Welcome home, Miss Eve," the maid said in perfect, unnerving unison. The sound made me jump. Eve took my hand and led me up the stone steps to face the stern-looking man. "Dad," she said, "I'm home." Her father's face was a mask, but his hands, clenched around the head of his cane, were trembling. "You're back," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Good. You're back." I stood there awkwardly, feeling like an insect under a microscope. Eve must have sensed it because she lifted our joined hands. "Dad," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is my husband." For Mr. Linwood sat on a plush sofa in the cavernous living room, the tip of his cane thumping a furious rhythm against the polished marble floor. "I do not approve," he boomed, his face turning red. "You disappear for 3 years, and the first time you come home, you bring this man with you and tell me he's your husband? I do not approve." The beautiful woman was at his side, gently rubbing his back. "Robert, please calm down. She's home now. We can talk this through." So, not the sister, the stepmother. This was a whole new level of complicated. "Whether you approve or not, we're already married," Eve said, her voice as calm and cool as ever. "We have a marriage license. We are legally husband and wife." The stepmother shot Eve a warning look before turning back to her father. "Eve, don't provoke your father. You have no idea how much he's worried about you these last 3 years. He was overjoyed when he heard you were coming home." She was talking to Eve, but the words were meant for him, a reminder not to drive his daughter away again. The reminder worked. Mr. Linwood took a deep breath, his anger receding slightly. "What about Preston Vance?" he asked, his voice now dangerously quiet. "He's been waiting for you ever since you left." Eve fell silent. For what I knew of her, that silence meant she felt guilty. I leaned over to the butler, who was standing stiffly by the door. "Who's Preston Vance?" I whispered. The butler gave me a long, pitying look. "Mr. Vance is Miss Eve's fiancé." "Fiancé? Eve, how many bombshells were you planning to drop on me tonight?" Rich heiress was one thing, but a secret fiancé was a whole other level. "I'm not getting a divorce," I blurted out, speaking to Eve but making sure her father heard me. "If you want to be with your side piece, you'll have to wait until I'm dead." He shot me a weary look. "I'm not getting a side piece." "Humph. You better not," I muttered, crossing my arms. Mr. Linwood looked from me back to Eve. "You see? Look at the kind of man you've chosen." He then fixed his steely gaze on me. "How old are you?" 27. "Education? Place of employment? What does your family do?" "I have an associate's degree from a community college. I was a team lead at Cosmos Innovations. My parents have passed away." With every answer I gave, Mr. Linwood's face grew darker. By the time I finished, it was as black as thunder, and even the stepmother looked uncomfortable. "Are you aware," Mr. Linwood said slowly, "that Cosmos Innovations is a subsidiary of Linwood Holdings?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I had always been so proud of that job. I, the community college grad, had worked my way up to team lead at a major tech firm. I managed kids with degrees from top-tier schools. I knew I'd gotten lucky joining the company when it was still a startup. I also knew a team lead was as high as I would ever go. And now, to find out that the one thing I was proud of my career was just another piece of her family's empire, a profound, crushing sense of inadequacy washed over me. His looks are average, his education is subpar, his career is mediocre, and he has no family to speak of. Mr. Linwood spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "He can't compare to Preston in any single way. Why would you choose him? Even if you don't like Preston, there are countless better men out there for you." Why him?" Eve squeezed my hand, then patted it reassuringly. She met my gaze for a moment before turning back to her father, her voice steady. "Dad, you can stop. I love him. I love him more than anything." Her words were like a shield. Who cared if her father didn't like me? Eve loved me. Preston Vance could be the most perfect man on earth, but Eve didn't love him. My nose started to tingle. I quickly wiped a tear from the corner of my eye before anyone could notice. A maid entered the room. "Mr. Vance is here," she announced. The man who walked in looked like he'd stepped straight out of a Ralph Lauren ad. He was tall, handsome, and wore a perfectly tailored suit. "Eve," he said, his eyes only for her. "You're back." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in the crook of her neck. "I've missed you so much. You're finally back." He just patted his back awkwardly. "Yes, I'm back." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Be magnanimous," I told myself. "You're the husband. You're the one who won. Don't let him get to you." Even in front of her father, Preston didn't hold on for too long. He released her and turned to Mr. Linwood. "My apologies, sir. I was overcome." Mr. Linwood just nodded silently and sighed. The stepmother, however, looked at Preston with an expression of deep concern. It was only then that Preston seemed to notice me. He looked at Eve. "And this is—" Eve smiled, pulling me to her side. "This is my husband, Leo Miller." "What?" Preston's handsome face contorted in shock. "Husband?" He glared at me, his eyes promising murder. I glared right back. "That's right, buddy. We got a marriage license. It's official. You want her? You'll have to wait till I'm dead." Preston turned back to Eve, his voice a broken whisper. "You're married?" He looked devastated. "How could you do this to me?" I tightened my arm around Eve's. "Honey," I said cheerfully, "you haven't introduced me to your friend here." Eve gave me a look that said she knew exactly what I was doing. I felt a flash of guilt, but she decided to play along. "This is Preston Vance. His family owns Apex Health." I stuck out my hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Vance," I said, my tone dripping with provocation. Preston gritted his teeth, but he couldn't refuse the handshake without losing face. He gripped my hand. "Likewise," he hissed. His grip was like a vice, strong enough to crush walnuts. When he finally let go, I yelped and shook my hand dramatically, holding up my reddened palm for Eve to see. I gave her my best wounded puppy look. She took my hand and gently blew on it, her breath tickling my skin. Then she shot me another look, this one a clear warning. "That's enough. Stop antagonizing him." Preston saw the whole exchange. His face flushed with rage. "Oomph." He let out a loud, frustrated grunt, turned on his heel, and stormed out. Yes. Round 1, victory to me. 6 Eve dismissed the maids. Once it was just family, she spoke. "Dad, I actually came here tonight to ask for your help." "With what?" "Leo's sick. He needs a kidney transplant, and he needs it fast. The waiting list here, he won't make it." Eve handed my medical report to her father. He took it and glanced over it dismissively. "Fine," he said, taking a sip of his tea, perfectly composed. "I can arrange for him to get treatment abroad. But I have one condition." I was terrified. What condition could possibly be worth my life? I didn't want Eve to compromise herself for me. I tugged gently on her sleeve and shook my head. She patted my hand, signaling for me to trust her. "Name it," she said to her father. "It's simple. You're not running away again. You're staying home, and you're going to take over the family business." "I'm old. It's time I retired." I was stunned. That was it? That was the condition? "I agree," Eve said without a moment's hesitation. This time, it was her father's turn to be surprised. "Just like that? No arguments? No negotiations?" "I knew what I was agreeing to when I decided to come back," she said. "I won't change my mind. You have my word." Mr. Linwood looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You ran away from home because you refused to take over the business," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "And now you do it for him. Fine. Be that way." He sighed. "I am tired. Your room is just as you left it. Go get some rest." With that, he pushed himself up with his cane and left the room. I followed Eve up to her childhood bedroom. It wasn't the lavish, pink and white princess room I might have expected. It was stark, masculine, and imposing. "I always hated this room," she said softly. "Dad thought the heir to the family should be tough, not some frilly little girl. My mother died when I was young," she continued. "Dad never remarried." I was confused. "What about the woman downstairs?" You saw the question in my eyes. "They never got married. No ceremony or anything. She's his mistress, I guess. People call her Mrs. Linwood out of respect for him. Is she the reason you left?" Eve scoffed. "Her? Please. She's not that important." She sat on the edge of the bed. Growing up, my father was incredibly strict. He loved my mother so much that even when the rest of the family pressured him to have a son to be the heir, he refused. He told me that everything the Linwoods had would one day be mine. I was so touched by that. I worked my tail off, desperate to earn his praise. He might have promised me the company, but he was never warm. He was cold, demanding. The only time he ever smiled at me was when I came in first place. So I tried harder. I studied and trained and never took a day off, all for that one rare smile. It suddenly made sense. She was so burnt out from her old life that all she wanted to do after she escaped was curl up at home and do nothing at all. I always believed he loved me, she went on, her voice trembling. Why else would he trust me with his huge empire? I told myself he was just busy, that he was a man who didn't know how to show affection. One Father's Day, I made him a huge dinner and a card. I thought he'd be so happy. He wasn't. Wait, I interrupted, my priorities suddenly skewed. You told me the meal you made for me was your first time cooking. Oh, she said with a tiny, sad smile. Eat. I was speechless. I just motioned for her to continue. He tore up the card. He swept the dishes off the table. He told me not to waste my time on such sentimental nonsense and to get back to my studies. Her voice cracked. I was so scared. It wasn't supposed to be like that. The truth is, I hate the business world. The backstabbing, the betrayal, it exhausted me. But I did it all. I tried to be the best just to make him proud. I pulled her in my arms. Don't, Eve. It's over. The past is the past. You have me now. I'll always love you, and I'll always be here for you. She hugged me back tightly. You know what I finally realized that day? She whispered into my chest. He hates me. Don't think about it anymore, I murmured, stroking her hair. It's over. I love you. I will always love you. You're sick, she said, pulling back. I shouldn't be burdening you with all this. I wiped a tear from her cheek. I'm happy you told me. I feel like I know you a little better now. Today's a day to remember. I tried to comfort her. You know, your dad seemed really concerned about you today. Maybe it's all a big misunderstanding. If you just talked it out, Eve didn't answer, and I knew not to push it. Later, I want to take a shower in her en-suite bathroom. I'm not exaggerating when I say the bathroom was bigger than my entire living room. It was all marble and chrome, with a jacuzzi tub big enough for 4 people. But tonight, I wasn't in the mood for a long soak. I showered quickly and joined Eve in bed. 7 the next day, Eve was gone before I woke up, off to deal with company business. After 3 years away, she had a lot to catch up on. Me? I was sitting in a small, sun-drenched garden on the estate, enjoying a glass of milk and some cookies. The staff had called it afternoon tea, but I couldn't have actual tea anymore. And as for coffee, the lifeblood of the corporate drone, I hoped to never touch the stuff again. My wife was the heiress to a massive fortune. I was going to be a trophy husband. The thought made me absurdly happy. I chuckled out loud. The old butler, who was standing nearby, gave me a strange look. Is everything all right, sir? I immediately straightened up. Yes, perfectly fine. Sir, he continued, your travel documents are being processed. You should be able to leave for your treatment on Monday. I'd never even been out of the country before, and my first trip abroad was for major surgery. Where am I going? I asked. I assumed it would be the UK, maybe Switzerland. Thailand, sir. I was surprised. Thailand? I'd never heard of it being a hub for cutting-edge medicine. The butler must have read my mind. In Thailand, he explained delicately, the waiting lists for donors are significantly shorter. I fell silent. I wasn't an idiot. I knew what that meant, but I wanted to live. So I decided not to ask any more questions. Sometimes it's better not to know how the sausage gets made. Another servant approached. Sir, Mr. Vance is here. Here to see Eve? I asked. Tell him she's not home. The servant shook his head. He's here to see you, sir. Me? What for? Another head shake. He didn't say. I sighed. Fine. Send him over. I might as well see what he was planning. A moment later, Preston Vance came striding across the lawn. He plopped down in the chair opposite me and looked me up and down, his eyes cold and critical. You're not good enough for her, he said flatly. And you are? I thought. I just smirked. Maybe not. But we're married. You? Preston started, his face clouding over, but his good breeding kicked in and he visibly calmed himself. Your marriage is temporary. Sooner or later, Eve will divorce you. And yet, I said, shrugging, right now we're husband and wife. I've known Eve since we were children, he pressed on. You've only known her for 3 years. What could you possibly have that I don't? I gave him the same answer. A marriage license. He was getting desperate. What can you offer her? Are you going to take her to society events and introduce yourself as the guy with the community college degree? You're an embarrassment to her. That one hit a nerve. My education had always been a sore spot. I dealt with a lot of condescension and snobbery at work because of it. If I'd had a better degree, with my skills, I would have been much more than just a team lead. But it was too late for regrets. I'd been too busy being a rebellious teenager to study. By the time I wanted to go back to school, I couldn't afford it. Even though he'd found my weakness, I didn't let it show. I just leaned back in my chair. And yet, I said, drawing out the words, we have a legally binding marriage certificate certified by the great state of Washington. Preston finally snapped. Is that the only thing you know how to say? No, I said cheerfully. I can also say that some people can't even make it to the homewrecker tryouts. He stared at me, sputtering, pointing a finger but unable to form words. I just folded my arms and stared back. Finally, defeated, he let out a growl of frustration and stormed away. Huh. Round 2. Another victory. Still, my good mood was gone. I asked the butler to move the rest of my cookies and milk up to the balcony off Eve's room. The view was even better up there, overlooking the entire back garden. I didn't realize that Mr. Linwood had been watching my entire confrontation with Preston from a window. He has a good head on his shoulders, he remarked to the butler, a rare compliment. Miss Eve has always had excellent judgment, the butler replied smoothly. Oomph. She just likes to defy me, the old man grumbled. She was such an obedient child. The older she gets, the more rebellious she becomes. The butler just smiled and said nothing. He was wise enough not to get involved in family drama. I sat on the balcony, eating my cookies and enjoying the view, but my mind was churning. I knew Eve loved me. She was too strong-willed to marry someone she didn't. She'd given up an empire to get away from a life she didn't want. No one could force Eve to do anything. But how long could that love last? Compared to Preston, I was a rock and he was a star. And what about all the other, even more brilliant men she would meet now that she was back in this world? As much as I loved the idea of being a pampered trophy husband, I couldn't do it. I had to keep up with her. I didn't need to be exceptional, but I couldn't be a source of shame for her. I made a decision. That night, when Eve came home, exhausted, I told her what I was thinking. She didn't object. She just asked me, seriously, what I wanted to do. I haven't figured that out yet, I admitted, scratching my head. She kissed me softly. That's okay. Take your time. We have plenty of it. The most important thing right now is for you to get better. Yeah, I felt a sense of relief. Why worry about a distant, uncertain future? Right now, in this moment, Eve loved me. After that day, Preston Vance never came by again. I don't know if I finally broke his spirit or if Eve warned him off. Life settled into a calm routine. Finally, the day came for me to leave for Thailand. I flew on the Linwood family's private jet, accompanied by a team of at least 10 people. 2 translators, 7 bodyguards, 3 personal assistants, and a few others whose jobs I couldn't figure out. I was, once again, floored by the sheer scale of their wealth. At the private hospital in Thailand, things moved incredibly fast. They found a suitable kidney in a week. I didn't dare ask where it came from. I was afraid of what my conscience might do with the answer. The surgery was a success. A month later, I was discharged. My body wasn't rejecting the new organ, and my recovery was going smoothly. I returned to the Linwood estate to continue recuperating. The doctors told me I could never do strenuous work and would have to take anti-rejection medication for the rest of my life. My grand ambitions would have to wait. I held Eve in my arms. I am sorry, Eve. I'm going to be an embarrassment to you for the rest of our lives. She laughed, a full, unrestrained sound of pure joy. Huh, an embarrassment? You're my husband. Who would dare say a word against you? Who would dare look down on you? Whatever they might think behind your back, to your face, every single one of them will have to address you respectfully as Mr. Miller. I couldn't help myself. Does that include your dad? She rolled her eyes and poked my forehead. You know, she said, I think we need to find something for you to do just to keep you from overthinking things. Okay, but what? You thought for a moment. You always said you regretted not going to college, right? What if you went back to school? I could send you to study abroad. My heart leaped. Really? I could go back to school. I'd never imagined it was possible. I was ecstatic. Of course, it's a bit complicated to arrange here, but overseas would be easy. America? The UK? You can use your recovery time to brush up on your English so you can actually understand the lectures. Yes, absolutely. But don't push yourself, she added. Just take it easy. What would you want to study? I've had this dream since I was a kid, I said, feeling shy. I never told you. I always want to be an artist. An artist? She said, her smile widening. That's wonderful. If that's what you love, then that's what you should do. She squeezed my hand. We could take it slow. You can study for a lifetime if you want. If you love to paint, then painting for the rest of your life sounds perfect. We sat there for a long time, talking about the future, and I knew, with a certainty that filled my entire being, that Eve and I were going to be happy together for a very, very long time.